I used to think that in order to have a successful launch in my small business, I had to be loud, I had to be everywhere at once, and I had to be at least slightly burnt out. But a couple of years in, I've learned that if a launch plan doesn't work for you, it won't work for your business either. My name is Astrid, and today I'll be talking about what a gentle launch looks like in my small business. So grab a cup of tea or something refreshing to drink and let's dive in. So I'm currently in the pre-launch period of my gentle marketing program, Grow, which is a group program that mixes kind of self-led and recorded elements. And I'm now launching it for the 4th or 5th time. And this time I'm experimenting with a waitlist only launch. So this is not my first launch of Grow, and ever since starting my business about 7 years ago, I've done quite a few launches, and that surprises me to some extent because when I started my business, I put off launching for the longest time because I had the idea that in order to launch, I had to be someone that I'm really not, and I had to kind of do things that don't feel good to me, that don't work with sort of my sensitivities, neurodivergence, what have you. But I've now developed a way of launching that does feel good to me. And essentially I've landed on 3 rules that help keep me grounded for planning my launches. So these 3 rules are about the channels and the content that I use during a launch. So the first rule is looking at what kind of existing content can I use. So in my case, that's going back to blog posts that are about, in the case of my marketing program, marketing, and whether they already have a call to action that links to Grow in them or whether I need to add them, whether the lead magnet that I developed a couple of years ago, which was a marketing struggles quiz, whether I could create some more pins for it. And I also looked at some older newsletters that I'd sent sort of around marketing tying in with Grow, and I uploaded a couple to my blog that I hadn't uploaded before. So essentially what I did is I just looked at existing content and then looked at, okay, so what can I do to make sure that that content that is already doing its job in like SEO and Pinterest, how can I make that tie in with this launch? Now, my second rule is about how can I use my existing channels to support this launch. And I kind of wrote about that or planned that in my Paper Republic notebook, and I'll put a screenshot kind of what my calendar pages look like. But essentially what I do, so one of the inserts that I have in the Paper Republic is the calendar page, and what I do is I write down at the beginning of the month, and sometimes I do this 3 months at a time, when I want to send out newsletters, when I've got like important dates for the Grow program that is always running. So there's always a monthly planning call and an office hours that I record. So what I decided to do this time is rather than having my 2 free newsletters a month, I upped that to 3 so that I could also write about the quiz and a new lead magnet. I also thought about, okay, so is there any new content that I can write? Are there any new pins that I can create? And then YouTube, which is a relatively recent channel, I thought about, okay, so how can I use that? So how can I use this channel to give a little bit of attention to Grow? So you might think about recording a specific video or writing a specific newsletter or writing specific blog posts or pins. So that's about the existing channels. And then the third question or rule that I have is what do I want to do new? What kind of extra stuff do I want to do? So if I look back over the past 4 or 5 launches for Grow, one of the first new things I created was a marketing struggles quiz a couple of years ago. And that continues to do really well. It really embodies kind of my marketing philosophy. It really gives a good idea of what Grow is and kind of what the kind of materials that I offer in Grow look like. And it's also really useful on its own. I find that really important. I don't want to create a freebie or a lead magnet or whatever you want to call it that is not exactly a standalone thing, if you get what I mean. Last year I created a mini podcast series around marketing that sort of tied in with the launch of Grow in the autumn. And this time I've created a marketing audit, which is a workbook of about 16 pages that really takes people through reviewing their existing marketing and thinking about, okay, so how is my marketing, how are my channels performing? Not just in terms of like, you know, the likes and the downloads and the reads and the views and whatever, but particularly also in terms of their energy and whether it works for them. And then kind of walks them through the different options based on kind of that data. And also talks about, you know, how to decide whether you want to add a new channel. And it's a resource that I'm really excited about, and I'm really excited to have created it. Now, what is important to me, if you look at these 3 questions, so how can I use existing content? How can I use my existing channels? And what, if anything, do I want to add new? All of this is evergreen content, and that is a kind of like a key pillar of my marketing in general. I hate the idea of creating content that disappears after 24 or 72 hours, as is the case with much social media. So what this content does is that even when I'm not like in launch mode, it will continue to attract people through SEO, through Pinterest, through YouTube, through Substack, and it will continue to bring people to my waitlist for Grow. And I'll talk more about choosing a waitlist only launch and kind of how I've planned that in a part 2 of this video. But that is evergreen content is really important to me. So along with a couple of rules of the things that I am doing, there's also lots of stuff that I'm not doing. And when I share about the waitlist only launch, I'll also share about kind of more the structure of my launch, what it looks like to me. But what I'm not doing is essentially embodied by this pin that I found on Pinterest, and there's nothing wrong with it. I just want to say that first and foremost. There's nothing wrong with scheduling your launches like this, with thinking about content in this way. And this is what I did / attempted to do in the early days of my business, which led me to feel completely overwhelmed, burnt out, and sick of whatever I was trying to launch before the launch even started. And I've realized since then that this launch calendar plan, whatever you want to call it, is not the only way to have a successful launch. You can have a successful launch that is much gentler, but absolutely no less effective. So one of the key things that I found is important to me is to choose focus over breadth or scatteredness. I felt incredibly scattered when I tried to be everywhere in the early days of my business, and really felt like I was just throwing stuff at the wall to see what would stick. And right now I feel much more focused. I have my channels, I have my content, and I can tweak that whenever I want to. And one of the reasons that I ended up choosing the waitlist is also as a way just of experimenting, but also to kind of deal with launch fatigue, both on my end and on my audience. So that's another way in which I'm tweaking. Finally, if you're familiar with my content, you won't be surprised that I don't use social media, and I haven't since 2021. Now, I talked about needing to tweak and wanting to tweak what I do during a launch. flexibility and launching according to my capacity are really the most important things for me, by choice, but primarily because I have no other choice. So I said that I'm really pleased about creating this new lead magnet this time, about the marketing audit. But I've had so many launches during which I didn't have the capacity to create something new. And I do believe that we don't have to create something new every time. It can be a really nice thing, both for ourselves and for our audience, to create a new lead magnet if we're relaunching. But for the longest time, I just didn't have the capacity. And this time I feel more energized and I'm more up to experimenting. So that's what I've been doing. But that also means that the launch content itself, so the emails that go out during launch week, I'm launching for 1 week to the waitlist only, is largely recycled content. And that means if I'm launching this for the 4th or 5th time, so I've written a lot of newsletters about this, which means that I have a lot of content to play with. And as I said, I recycle them. I know that, sometimes you might send the same newsletter again, which is fine, because really no one will remember that you sent the same thing 5 months ago or a year ago. Or I like rework it. In my case, a constant struggle, journey, challenge is to shorten my emails, and I used to write really long launch emails. So the reworking is also making it a little bit more concise. All right, so that is essentially what the bones of my gentle launches look like. And at the core are these 3 rules, and really being flexible and working according to my capacity. So as I said, I'll do a part 2 of this, talking more about kind of the launch strategy and why I chose the waitlist only launch, and what that looks like. Now, if this resonates with you, I'd love to invite you to check out some of the marketing resources that I mentioned in this video, and I'll put them in the description, and to sign up for the waitlist for Grow. If marketing in a different way, in a gentle way, but really effective way, is intriguing to you and it sounds like what you need, I think you'll find Grow and just the content that I'll be sharing through the waitlist really useful. And I'd also love to know is, how do you feel about launching? So I'd love for you to leave a comment. I'm very happy to answer and have a bit of a conversation in the comments. And I look forward to seeing you back here soon.